Pakistan. If you think of what you're reading in the press, you're seeing things like congressmen are preparing to end aid to Pakistan. Pakistan refuses to give helicopter back, may show it to China. The enemy is in Pakistan. The unraveling of the U.S. Pakistan relationship. Tolerance for Pakistan's double dealing must end. That's basically the tone of what we've seen ever since the raid which successfully killed Osama bin Laden. You also see things, how in the world could the world's #1 terrorist, the face of Al-Qaeda, be sitting in comfort a mile or two from a major Pakistani military base? Obviously, they had to know. My view is, go drive up Sheridan Road. Look at some of those estates and the walls and the gates. You don't know what's going on in there. I don't know what's going on in there. If I were OBL, I wouldn't have told anyone in the Pakistan government where I was. You tell one other person and your risk of having it known and getting caught increases dramatically, geometrically, because they're going to tell somebody else also. So personally, it's not clear to me that anyone in the Pakistan government knew where he was. That is very counter to what seems logical. But I believe that. And I think we ought to ask the tough questions. Don't get me wrong. But I think to jump to judgment immediately and assume that he had to be known to the Pakistani government, I think is probably a mistake to jump to that conclusion. Second, the contention that Pakistan is not dealing straight with us and that therefore we should sever relations and cut off any assistance we're providing them. You know, that would make you feel good for about 5 minutes. And then you'd look and say, well, where are we? And what you've got is a Muslim country with a lot of radicals, with people in the intelligence agency, the ISI, who clearly for years supported the Taliban. Pakistan was one of the only 3 countries in the world that had diplomatic relationships with Afghanistan's Taliban leadership back then. And unquestionably, Al-Qaeda has been hiding in the federally administered tribal areas up north, the so-called Fatah, and the Pakistanis haven't done much. Now, let's examine that for a minute. The extremists, there are madrasas in Pakistan that are radical and teaching people to go out and kill people. There's no question about that. When Musharraf was there, they tried to kill him 3 or 4 times. So he understood the threat. The situation in that country was that they were doing basically not a bad job collecting up terrorists in urban areas outside of the Fatah. In the Fatah, they were not doing a good job. They sent people up there and they had hundreds killed. Why didn't they do well up there? It's an ungoverned area. They don't control it. There are ungoverned areas all around the world, and they're very hospitable for terrorists and for Al-Qaeda. And so we look at it and we say, well, my goodness, we know there's terrorists up there, and the line between Pakistan and Afghanistan really doesn't even exist. These tribes cross back and forth all the time. They're the same friends and relatives. And the idea that it's some neat situation where they could control it if they wanted to seems to me is a reach. Then you go back in history and you say to yourself, well, what did we do with Pakistan before? I think it was the 1980s. There was a senator named Pressler. He offered an amendment after they exploded a nuclear weapon, and we severed relationships with them. Made us feel terrific. And what happened? We went through, what, 20 years, a whole generation, with no military-to-military contact between the United States and the Pakistan military. Harmful. Not helpful at all. Comes 9/11, we go over and talk to Musharraf, and here he is in a nuclear country, Muslim country, worried about India and Kashmir, and he stands up and agrees to help us in putting pressure on terrorists. Enormous help. Base opportunities where we can fly out of there, transit across the country to get into a landlocked country in Afghanistan. The advantage that we gained from the relationship that Musharraf, at his risk, stood up and provided the United States of America was enormous. We could cut off aid, we could sever relations, we could say they're not perfect, they're not like we are. In fact, we said that. We told them, no, I didn't, but someone in our government said, gee, Musharraf is wearing a uniform, and that's not a good idea. He ought to take his uniform off. So he took his uniform off, and he got tossed out of office. Are we better off today with the governments than there? I think not. I don't think that's an impressive government. Musharraf, the idea that everyone in the world ought to behave like we do, it seems to me, is not rational. Other countries aren't like we are. They have different histories, different cultures, different neighbors. We aren't like we used to be. We still had slaves into the 1800s. Women didn't vote into the 1900s. We had a bloody civil war, lost hundreds of thousands of our citizens. So we've been changing, and they change and evolve over time. And it seems to me that it's dangerous if we look around the world and say, oh, we can't deal with that country, they're corrupt. Well, my goodness, isn't that amazing? There's gambling in the casino. We have congressmen that go to jail. What, about every 3 or 4 years somebody gets put in the slammer? Of course there's corruption. There's corruption in most every country in the world. Probably least here. But being judgmental about it and saying we're not going to deal with people that aren't like us, that aren't like the way we are today, you can't do that. We can't function in this world. We've got political interest, security interest, and economic interest. And they need to be balanced. And you can't simply say, in my view, you can't simply say that in every instance, this particular interest trumps that interest. We have to be not uncomfortable. You may not like it, but you have to be not uncomfortable dealing with countries and recognizing that they will cooperate with us in some ways and maybe not in other ways. And I worry that this counter-charge on Pakistan, I was pleased to see Senator Kerry was over there talking to him, and he was using very measured language and thoughtful language that reflects the complexity of the relationship we've got with Pakistan, and I would submit also reflects the reality that they bring a lot to our needs with respect to cooperating. We can't solve most of the problems we face in the world. We can't solve by ourselves. We have to work with other countries, and clearly you have to do that. You've got to accept the fact that they'll cooperate with us in some ways, but maybe not in every way. And in some instances, their cooperation may be imperfect. And we have to decide how do we feel about that. And my view is that we need a balanced, thoughtful approach. You know, we did the same thing with Indonesia years back, another large Muslim country. And we decided that, I guess it was their police force, was behaving in a way that we found inconsistent with our values. So we severed relationships, all military-to-military relationships with Indonesia. Where did it leave us? You end up with a whole generation of Indonesians and military and U.S. military not knowing each other, not connected, not transferring our concepts of civilian control over the military to the other countries. So I mention that because I think it's an example of something that we need to be thoughtful about and not simply react in a way that satisfies us and makes us feel good for a few minutes because we've taken the moral high ground. The moral high ground, I mean, what did Winston Churchill say? He ended up working with Joseph Stalin, a butcher, if there ever was one, because he wanted to defeat Nazi Germany. Did he like Stalin? No. Did he agree with the way Stalin behaved? No. but was he willing to cooperate and provide a relationship that was helpful to his principal goal of defeating Nazi Germany? And I think no one would have liked that have to deal with Stalin, but I think few people today, in retrospect, would think that the United States and/or Great Britain made a mistake in dealing with Stalin. I think they did the right thing.